This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
U.S. imposes sanctions on 2 senior South Sudanese officials. Egypt's President El-Sisi says militias holding Libyan government hostage. And UNHCR launches first global refugee forum as displacements soar. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. Boeing says to halt 737 MAX production next month. And in sports news, we check out all the action at the second Triathlon African Cup in Dakar. The United States government has imposed sanctions on 2 senior South Sudanese officials, accusing them of instigating conflict in the country. South Sudanese Minister of Cabinet Affairs Martin Elia Lomuro and Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs Kuol Manyang Juk have been blacklisted for their alleged role in perpetuating the conflict by obstructing the peace process. The sanctions freeze any U.S. assets held by the officials and prohibit Americans from doing business with them. The latest sanctions come as Washington is reevaluating its relationship with South Sudan after President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar agreed in November to give themselves more time to form a unity government. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by John Gachier, a veteran journalist and expert on South Sudanese affairs. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just start with the interest that the United States has in South Sudan to the extent that it would impose sanctions specifically to the allies of President Salva Kiir. Just speak to us about that.
Thank you very much. For me, this is a very dramatic development in that for a long time, the government of South Sudan, and in particular the rivals and the opposition, the government and what have you, everybody has been perhaps hoping that there will be some courage to kind of call it for what it is, hold certain people accountable and make it difficult and perhaps make it painful to the key players in the conflict. Now, when you have the Minister for Defense and Veteran Affairs, and you have the Minister in charge of Cabinet Affairs, like Martin Elia, these two are very powerful and very close allies of President Salva Kiir. Indeed, in terms of the political, ethnic security apparatus within President Salva Kiir, these two are very, very key players. And to have them then identified, I believe, is perhaps a signal that the United States now is trying to really put its money where it's, rather making it difficult. Now, would this then be an indication or a sign that possibly the larger IGAD, the larger regional countries and the African Union are perhaps willing to join into this? People are hoping this could be a good sign to kind of jog, so for lack of a better term, and kind of send a signal, so to speak, to Salva Kiir and his leadership that we are going to make it more painful and direct. So it's a very important, for me, it's a very, dramatic development.
Now, is this announcement of the sanctions that have been imposed now, is it going to, do you think that considering other regions and other global powers, like you said, they haven't taken this stance just yet, do you believe that it's going to have the desired impact that Washington would like it to have?
Yes, at least to the government of Salva Kiir, and by reverse to the Riek Machar people, that you cannot, as it were, you will be held responsible. Will this then prompt both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir to really perhaps agree? Everybody is hoping this will be the beginning. And indeed, let's put it this way, when you have the president's 2 key allies under sanctions by the United States, then the message to everybody else within the South Sudan political elite and leadership, they would be willing to kind of push for more of a peace agreement. So I think it's a good sign. But as we say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I think for the United States taking the lead, and part of the Troika, that is Britain and Norway, because they've kind of, over the last 1 year or so, they've kind of played, a kind of a pullback, but now they've kind of taken the advantage and taken the initiative. So it's a good sign.
So what this is a peace agreement. That is what is at the core of this entire discussion and what is happening in South Sudan between Riek Machar and, of course, President Salva Kiir. Now, some people might say, well, external forces at hand here. Would it be sustainable if they do come to an agreement? But it wasn't an agreement that came internally. It was an agreement that came pretty much forced from external forces.
There are two ways perhaps one would look at this. I think for Salva Kiir, in many ways, it appears he is held, to some extent, held hostage by a group or a faction around the security sector arrangement within Juba. That's one. On Riek Machar, he's also held hostage by a group that is around the issue of power sharing within the states and the new peace agreement. So for both players, then this might perhaps open up that they might be willing to kind of compromise. Remember, as we are speaking now, Salva Kiir and Riek are still having talks in Juba at the moment. And the key sticking points are two, really. Security sector reforms and the number of states. And the original issue was whether the states would be reduced from 28 to 20 and perhaps back to 10. But all these are kind of, in my view, they are posturing. The key issue that has to be addressed, and sufficiently so, is security sector reforms and also the creation of an army that both parties feel safe and is also representative to a large extent of the larger South Sudanese issues.
Definitely a developing story, and we're going to keep an eye on it and continue to discuss it because it is an important story for the African continent. Thank you so much for joining us, John Gachia. He is a veteran journalist and expert on South Sudan affairs. Well, meanwhile, South Sudan's government says talks between President Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar are progressing well as they work at resolving outstanding issues in the peace agreement. The government says its position is closer to that of Riek Machar's group and believes the parties will reach an agreement soon. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
A week of meetings between President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar. One of the main aims of the talks is to try and resolve the contentious issue of the number and boundaries of states, but there is still no agreement. President Salva Kiir's group wants to maintain the current 32 states, saying it helps take services closer to the rural population. The opposition group led by Riek Machar disagrees. The group says President Kiir's government wants to use the number of states to give more government positions to the rural population to try and gain more votes in elections scheduled for the end of the transitional period.
We are moving very well. We are hoping to reach an agreement on all outstanding issues. We assure everyone that after the 100 days, we will form a new government. We will not have any more extension of the period for formation of the government.
Parties to the South Sudan's 2018 peace agreement have agreed to form a unity government in February next year. That, however, depends on the completion of agreed security sector reforms such as unification, training, and redeployment of joint forces. That's because opposition group led by Riek Machar wants a new security arrangement before forming a unity government. South Sudan's government admits that training and unifying of the forces is behind schedule. It says it has now released $16 million for implementation of the security sector reforms. The East African regional body IGAD says it has already put in place some infrastructural projects such as boreholes in camps where the armed forces are stationed. IGAD says all is ready for training of the joint forces to begin this week. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Egypt's parliament has announced that it no longer recognizes the authority of Libya's government of national accord. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said on Sunday that the GNA was hostage to terrorist groups in Tripoli. Tensions have been mounting between Cairo and Tripoli, especially after the GNA recently signed a controversial maritime border deal with Turkey. Here's CGTN's Adel Al-Muruhi with more.
The Egyptian Speaker of Parliament, Ali Abdel Al, announced this week that the Libyan Eastern Parliament is the only legitimate representative for the Libyan people. Abdel Al's statement disregarded any recognition to Fayez al-Sarraj, the head of the government of national accord. More critique from Cairo followed on Sunday. This time it was from the Egyptian president, who strongly supports the GNA's prime rival, General Khalifa Haftar.
National armies are responsible for security and stability in their nations. We say this so that there will be no role for armed militias or extremist militias or terrorism. Why can't the Libyan government have its own will there? Because it's a hostage to the armed and terrorist militias which are in Tripoli. This is the truth.
I think there's a transformation in the Turkish-Libyan relations regarding the presence of military troops in Libya. That has confirmed Turkey's involvement in supporting militias with finances and arms. That is making Cairo shift its stance towards Sarraj. It could be only to put pressure, at least for now.
Among these announcements from Cairo, division over al-Sarraj's authority appeared to be growing within the Libyan embassy to Egypt. A statement attributed to the embassy said that it no longer follows al-Sarraj's government. Later, another announcement denied it.
We've been expecting the Libyan embassy to shut down following that suspicious maritime border agreement between the GNA and Turkey. It has exposed the foreign influence over the GNA. Many Libyan politicians objected to that, amongst them officials in the Libyan embassy here, and they are no longer in agreement with Mr. al-Sarraj. The embassy here says it has shut down for security reasons, but many reports confirm the division amongst the embassy's employees.
The Egyptian government has not confirmed or denied the parliament's announcement disregarding al-Sarraj as a representative to Libya.
The relations between Egypt and Libya continue. Egypt will host talks to find common ground between the Libyan National Army and al-Sarraj's government. He depends on militias for support, and some of them adopt extremist and terrorist ideologies, which is something Egypt will never accept.
Following his critique, President el-Sisi said that Egypt is still pursuing a political agreement among Libyan factions. To end the division among Libyans, foreign intervention must halt, or at least the divide among regional powers for that conflict must be bridged. Adil al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by Dr. Ziad Akil, a political analyst and researcher at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Akil. What political and security impact on Libya would you say the move by the Egyptian parliament and president might have?
Well, first of all, hello. It's always good to be here. I believe that the Egyptian position, there's nothing new in it. This is the position that Egypt has been taking ever since the start of the political separation in 2014, that it is against any sort of foreign intervention. But when the foreign intervention comes from the side of Turkey, which is, it's a relationship that has a lot of tension between both countries, and at the same time when it sort of cancels the legitimacy of the agreement in the Skhirat signed in December 2015, because they are signing agreements with one side without even consulting the other. So Egypt had to have a position. How will this reflect on the Libyan inside? It will, of course, show that the Libyan National Army or the Libyan East or the House of Representatives, they have regional allies as powerful as Egypt. And we also need to take into consideration that there was some military maritime exercises that Egypt did last week in a message to Turkey saying that we are present in the south and the east of the Mediterranean. It is definitely a point of strength that Khalifa Haftar or the Libyan National Army can build upon, saying that we do have regional allies, and I do believe that more statements will be made by other allies like France, Russia, and the Emirates.
Dr. Akil, we know the agreements made between Turkey and Libya, and some are saying that Turkey's military pledge to Libya has risked complicating matters in the region. What do you believe Turkey's likely reaction might be to the decision made by Egypt to isolate Ankara's ally in Libya?
Well, as I said, it's a push and pull relationship between Egypt and Turkey over the past years. But Turkey seems so adamant to use Libya as a card in its relationship with the West. So the idea of signing the agreements in itself assures that Turkey does not really care for the international community or for the regional players. It only cares for its own interests. And its main interests are not those related to security, but are those related to the right to look for natural gas within Libyan regional waters. So I do not believe that Turkey will have a significant reaction towards this, but of course it will be very careful with its military presence in Libya. What Egypt did, we can call as some sort of deterrence message for Turkey. But Turkey is still on its energy search and still on finding new places of influence within the Arab world, the Middle East, and North Africa, and the Mediterranean. So it is unlikely that Turkey will be present militarily, like boots on the ground within the Libyan scene.
Yeah,
but it is very likely that Turkey will use this agreement. Yes.
Dr. Akil, I would like us to speak about foreign involvement, because it seems as though stabilization in Libya seems to be driven by foreigners who seem to have their own interests. Why is this so, and what are the interests pushing foreign powers to meddle in Libya's internal affairs?
Well, the problem is that international organizations cannot really achieve any success in Libya. The UN has been failing in implementing the plans that it designed, and the EU is also not active in Libya. The African Union is not active. The Arab League is not active. So states that have interests in Libya work separately. And of course, these interests might clash, might contradict. And this is what we are witnessing right now. We are witnessing the formation of two axes inside of Libya at the moment. There is this axis supporting the West, made of Turkey, Qatar, and Italy. And there's this axis supporting the East, made of Egypt, France, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. So it is not a proxy war, but there is a lot more foreign intervention in Libya that will eventually elongate or make the conflict much longer and takes Libya out of the track of political solutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akel, for joining us. That was Dr. Ziad Akel, a political analyst and researcher at the Akram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. When we return, here's what you can expect. UNHCR launches first global refugee forum as displacements soar. And Congo rolls out measles vaccinations in Goma amid civil unrest.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The United Nations is calling for political and social change to address violence in West Africa. The special representative of the Secretary General says the region has been shaken by unprecedented violence in recent months. This comes just days after 71 soldiers were killed in an attack in Niger. Our correspondent Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Speaking at a briefing to the United Nations Security Council, Mohamed Ibn Chambers, the special representative for the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, said last week's attack against a military camp in Niger still haunts the region. It's thought militants linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL have killed up to 230 soldiers in the Sahel region in the last 4 months. But Chambers said terror was not the only cause.
Endogenous factors of local conflicts have been documented. They include governance deficits, in particular poor management of natural resources, inequalities and marginalization, corruption, and the broader failure of governments to deliver its regalian function.
The heads of state in Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger and Burkina Faso have called for more international support. But the United States Deputy Ambassador told the Security Council that West African leaders were not doing enough to combat violence. The African Union said the situation requires more than just an armed response.
Addressing this issue will require a holistic approach that must involve political and socio-economic actions, such as strengthening the presence of the state in the peripheries, enhance the state's ability to deliver basic services, including the rule of law, education, infrastructure, and strong environmental policies to address climate change.
Chambers said the Security Council could play a decisive role in supporting such efforts in West Africa by closing the financial and supply corridors relied on by armed groups and using targeted sanctions as leverage in the region. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
The wife of Zimbabwe's vice president will spend Christmas behind bars after the magistrate's court remanded her in custody to December the 30th on attempted murder charges. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with the details.
Mary Mbaiwa is alleged to have tampered with her husband's medical equipment while he was receiving medical care in neighboring South Africa in July this year. The vice president had been unwell and was out of the country getting medical attention for 4 months, initially in India and South Africa and eventually in China. His estranged wife's arrest coincides with comments he made over the weekend at a ZANU-PF conference where he warned that the purge on corruption would spare no one, including those people who know him personally. It also comes soon after he filed divorce papers against her last week. Mbaiwa also faces 11 counts of money laundering and foreign currency externalization involving hundreds of thousands of dollars used to purchase a house, 2 luxury vehicles and furniture in South Africa. She denies all the charges.
Justice will prevail at the end of the day, so we don't have to worry about that.
While the magistrate's court has denied bail, a higher court can overturn that decision. And earlier today, the defense team said that is the next port of call as they plan to lodge an appeal at the Master of the High Court. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The first ever Global Refugee Forum will open on Tuesday in Geneva. The meeting seeks to find new approaches to deal with refugee-related issues. It comes amid 2019 displacement numbers hitting a new record. The forum also aims to translate the principle of responsibility sharing with funding, real resettlement pledges, and ways to improve refugee education as well as access to work. It's widely expected that the issue of Syrian refugees living in Turkey will also be raised during the forum. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is attending the forum as a co-convener, has said Turkey aims to settle 1 million civil Syrian war refugees in the mostly Kurdish area of northern Syria. This is despite the international humanitarian law that states that refugee repatriation has to be voluntary and to a safe and secure country.
We're starting a new decade. During the last 10 years, refugee numbers surged to 26 million, and solutions are hard to find. We must reverse this. We need a new deal for refugees and those hosting them.
I think all of the evidence suggests that the fortress approach to managing migration isn't going to work. It's not going to stop those flows of increasingly desperate people. It's not going to address the root causes of why those people are moving. And it's not addressing the deep vulnerability that people who are displaced face in contexts close to their home. And so for all those reasons, I think we do need a fundamentally new approach to refugee protection. And just putting up ever more borders is not going to work.
Europeans and Americans are in a race to the bottom at the moment in refusing to give protection to the families, the children, the women, the men who need protection. So I hope again that Europe and North America will lead as examples, as we did in the past, in terms of giving protection in their hour of greatest need.
About 2 months since the arrival of the first group of evacuees from Libya to Rwanda, the evacuees are now working to integrate with the local community. Although the majority of the group says they feel welcome and are keen to begin their transition, some of the evacuees are still holding on to their vision of a prosperous life in Europe.
Flowers and grass stalks make the room festive. They set the stage for the ceremony that will take place here later today. It is a celebration to mark the baptism of a little baby boy. Babies are reason to celebrate under normal circumstances, but this one is even more special. He was born to refugee parents in Libya, and now he and his parents have arrived at the United Nations Emergency Transit Center in Gashora, Rwanda, on their way to a new life. 306 refugees call this camp home. 24-year-old Simon left home in Eritrea for Libya in 2017, seeking safe passage to the better life he believed awaited him in Europe.
My family, my father and my dad, they spent their whole years, their whole time in order to serve me, a good future. They sent me to a good school. They gave me whatever I want until I was a teenager. So it's time for me to give back to my family. We thought Libya was a place for us just to cross the sea.
But he didn't make it to Europe. He, like thousands of refugees and asylum seekers, was detained in Libya after being rescued or intercepted at sea by the Libyan Coast Guard. After an agreement with the African Union, Rwanda agreed to temporarily take in at least 500 of these immigrants who mainly come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia and Sudan.
When they told us that we are going to be evacuated from Libya, the first thing that we done is we raise our hand to God and we thank Him. It was like we were born again and again, so we were so happy.
The United Nations Refugee Agency provides the migrants with housing and food. They're also learning the local languages so that they can integrate with the local community and their children can get an education.
The community is actually good, really. They can respect us, even we respect them. We live in a good, we interact with them, good way.
They haven't been here long, but these refugees have found a semblance of normalcy in this camp. They have formed relationships and found routines. And though they are still waiting to be settled, here they have found community. Authorities say the evacuated refugees can return to their homeland, be sent to a third country or stay in Rwanda. Some of the evacuees, however, still dream of starting a beautiful new life overseas.
I'm waiting to reach to Europe, maybe to a place where I can repay my family's debt. I have a lot of debts. When I reach Europe, I will work hard. I will get what I was thinking, and I hope they will be still alive until I repay them.
But now they dream in safety, and every day they remember the over 4,500 immigrants the United Nations Refugee Agency says are still detained in Libya. And when they find a reason to celebrate, they do. Every little freedom, every celebration has been hard-won, and they believe there's more to come yet. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN, Gashora, Rwanda.
Meanwhile, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, health authorities, along with the World Health Organization, have launched a measles immunization campaign. This third phase, taking place in the city of Goma, aims to reach 19 million children before the end of the year. The epidemic has already killed thousands this year, with low immunization rates and high levels of malnutrition fueling high mortality rates. There are also thousands more suspected measles cases in the region, which is already reeling from an ongoing Ebola epidemic.
Measles is a very serious disease that attacks children, and we parents do not know how to defend ourselves against this disease. That's why I wanted him to get the vaccine so that his body can develop immunity.
This campaign is meant to deal with a disease that is ravaging our children. The government organizes measles vaccination campaigns every 3 years. Now, the campaign was a little late, but with the measles epidemic ravaging our city, they have been able to organize it.
Your business news is coming up after the break. Here are some highlights. Boeing says to hold 737 MAX production next month. And Egypt unveils a $6 billion plan to support local plants and factories.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for your business news. Boeing is planning to suspend production of its beleaguered 737 MAX planes next month. The move is a drastic step after the Federal Aviation Administration said its review of the planes would continue into next year. Boeing's decision, made after months of a cash-draining global grounding of its best-selling aircraft, worsens one of the most severe crises in the history of the century-old manufacturer. The measure presents further problems for airlines, which have lost hundreds of millions of dollars and cancelled thousands of flights without the fuel-efficient planes in their fleets. Boeing says it does not plan to lay off furlough workers at the Renton, Washington factory where the 737 MAX is produced. It says some of the 12,000 workers there will be temporarily reassigned. Kenya has officially commissioned SGR freight services from the capital Nairobi to Naivasha Inland Container Depot. The services are expected to ease cargo transportation from the port of Mombasa to neighboring countries. Chinese State Councillor Wang Yong was among those who witnessed the commissioning. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta was also present.
Today, I believe, is yet another momentous day. A day we add yet another brick in our quest to build a stronger foundation for our current and future prosperity. Today, we are here to mark the commencement of the freight train service to the Naivasha Inland Container Depot, thus clearly making an unequivocal statement that we as a people are truly ready to ascend.
The second phase of the standard gauge railway in Kenya was commissioned in October this year by President Uhuru Kenyatta. It is part of a project that connects the coastal city of Mombasa to Kisumu near Lake Victoria and into Uganda. CGTN's Terry Wangari took the train from Nairobi and filed this report.
The Nairobi-Naivasha SGR is approximately 120 kilometers long and cuts along Nairobi, Ngong, Kajiado, Nakuru and Narok counties. The passenger train will stop at 5 stations. These are Ongata Rongai, Ngong, Nachu, Mai Mahiu and Suswa in Naivasha. The project also features 3 tunnels, including a 4.5-kilometer long tunnel, making it the longest tunnel in East and Central Africa. The railway line is expected to ease congestion at the Nairobi-Naivasha highway, as well as boost regional trade and the local economy. The SGR project was launched together with the Nairobi Express Highway and the Naivasha Inland Container Depot. Together, these projects will facilitate the movement of goods and people from Mombasa to Naivasha with ease.
Commencement of operations, therefore, of the Makadara Express from Nairobi to Suswa will address the congestion of roads in the Embakasi and the ICD area, which has led to severe traffic congestion, increased vehicle operating costs, and increased accident rates. Such congestion has been a hindrance to trade and economic growth. It is for this reason that the government embarked on the development of the Nairobi Expressway.
So I am fully convinced that with the new SGR, ICD and Expressway, Kenya friends will travel, study, work and do business even more conveniently.
China Communications and Construction Company builds the second phase of the railway at a cost of $1.44 billion. The construction of the SGR, which now connects the coastal city of Mombasa to Naivasha, is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which seeks to connect continents through one transportation network. A Nairobi-Suswa ticket will cost as little as $2 for an economy seat. The journey between Nairobi and Naivasha is on average 2.5 hours by road. But with a steady speed of 116 kilometers per hour, this train cuts the time by half, making it easier for commuters to access the capital. Official data showed that SGR generated sales of around $55 million last year on the back of the cargo business. The passenger business generated sales of nearly $15 million, underlining the power of the cargo business in driving sales. With the opening of the second phase of the railway, this figure is expected to rise. Terry Wangari, CGTN, Mai Mahiu, Kenya.
Modern infrastructure projects like roads, ports and railways that are financed or built by China have injected vitality into Kenya's transformation agenda. Kenya has had a long-standing collaboration with China on various projects for decades. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy takes a look at some of the key projects undertaken so far.
Now, China has overtaken external lenders to become largest financier of infrastructure projects that have positioned Kenya as a transport and logistics hub in the region. Now, some of the outstanding projects carried out in recent years by China in Kenya include a Thika Superhighway. Thika Superhighway was a game changer for Kenya in many ways. The original road was always clogged with traffic jam that could last for hours, as well as regular road accidents, as activities along the route increased with rise of residential in other towns. The construction brought forth the Chinese expertise, as 3 of Chinese companies constructed different sections. Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway. The Mombasa-Nairobi SGR is considered Kenya's biggest infrastructure project since independence. The SGR project was 90% funded by China Exim Bank, with the Kenyan government contributing the remaining 10%. The Nairobi-Naivasha Standard Gauge Railway. The 120-kilometer railway line has been built by China Road and Bridge with an investment of $1.5 billion. Now, this new extension is connected to another Chinese-built railway line, Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway, which is worth $3.2 billion. The SGR project carries with it the century-old dream of the Kenyan people and provides a fast lane to growth and prosperity for the region. Now, other projects carried out by China include laying of high-speed internet connectivity by Huawei. Now, Huawei worked together with local telecom operators to provide high-speed wireless broadband services to major cities in Kenya. Now, sections of A109 National Highway from Voi to Mutito Adei. The A109 National Highway is the main road that connects Nairobi to the coastal region. It is a major nerve that moves millions of vehicles across the 2 major cities of Nairobi and Mombasa. Back to you.
A joint agriculture trade exhibition organized by the Somali and Turkish business communities opened this Sunday in Mogadishu. Both sides showcased various products for the potential exchange of market supply. A panel of Turkish and Somali experts also discussed the opportunities and challenges in the agriculture sector while providing possible solutions. Senior government officials from both countries, including Somalia's Trade and Industries Minister Abdullahi Ali Hassan and Turkish Ambassador Mehmet Yilmaz, were present. Somalia recently started the export of its agriculture produce, including bananas, to Turkey and Gulf countries.
This agricultural expo is start of a long-term government of Somalia strategy to increase and modernize our agricultural produces in order to boost our export so as to balance it with our import. Currently, there is a big gap between our export and import that was resulted by the period of state of lawlessness in the country.
We are encouraging Turkish private sector to come to Somalia and invest in agriculture and fisheries. Some have already started their business in Somalia, and others still negotiate with the relevant ministries. We are also ready to enhance cooperation between the ministers of agriculture of both Turkey and Somalia for restructuring and modernization of agriculture in Somalia.
I was among students who presented a business plan here and emerged the 3rd overall winner. I want to thank the organizers of this great expo event for the opportunity. I will pursue my goal to establish my business idea.
The Egyptian government has announced a $6.5 billion fund to support the country's local industry. The aim is to get plants and factories affected by Egypt's political upheaval since 2010 back on their feet. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
There are about 5,200 closed factories because of debts. The government is helping these factories to reopen.
It's a 3-part initiative by the government and central bank. The first is to fund SMEs in the manufacturing sector. The second is to cancel debts and debt services on closed factories as long as they reopen and resume production. The third is about real estate and land for the factories.
This is an initiative by the government to focus on industrialization. Scores of factories and plants have stopped production due to the political and economic stabilities of the last decade. Amr Fattouh owns a polyplast factory that has managed to survive the recession, but he says it wasn't easy.
There were many problems facing businesses. It started with the two uprising and their fallout, then the burdens of economic reforms, also the devolution of the Egyptian pound. It was tough at the beginning. There was no vision or plan for industries. Things are better now, but we must offer more facilities. Why should a businessman pay huge tariffs on purchasing equipment for his factory? He should be encouraged to import materials for production. The bureaucracy is a stumbling block too. It must be abolished so the producer and the state can benefit.
The government has allocated $6.5 billion for this plan.
Imagine 5,000 products that you can produce instead of importing. We have to support these companies. We should also protect the ones that are already operating to ensure they are sustaining any difficulties. This will encourage other foreign businessmen to invest in the country.
This week, the central bank has shelled out $2 billion to pay off debts and interests on over 5,000 factories. There's about another $6 billion to support the private sector in establishing new industries as well. The target is to establish over 5,000 industrial institutions in the next year. More production means more revenue, more exports, and more job opportunities. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A Tunisian startup is offering commuters an alternative to hard-to-find taxis. It's introduced the country's first scooter service in an effort to enhance the country's transportation sector. CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar brings us more on Grassroots tonight.
Tunisia has launched the country's first taxi scooter service called Intigo. The move is hoped to ease traffic in the country as well as offer transport alternatives to its citizens.
We launched the taxi scooter because we saw that the biggest obstacle for the Tunisian people is transportation. No matter their social group, age or gender, everyone has a transportation problem. So we decided to provide a solution to this urgent problem that we are facing. But this is not our final goal. Our vision goes beyond that. We want to lay the groundwork for the prosperity of the digital economy.
At least 30% lower than the price of an ordinary taxi, Intigo's taxi scooters are not only more affordable, but also easier and quicker to find on Tunisia's busy streets.
The idea is very good. It is going to facilitate the transportation of the people and passengers because we have a huge problem in public and private transportation. So the presence of this motorcycle is going to facilitate the transportation of citizens.
Passengers can order an Intigo taxi scooter using an app developed by the Tunisian startup.
The way to use Intigo is by downloading on your smartphone an app that we have developed in our office. It is very easy to use. After installing the app, the passengers just have to specify their location and destination, and a scooter will come for them. The app will tell them the exact cost.
If the company's trial run proves successful by December, Intigo plans to distribute some 50 taxi scooters in the cities of Tunis, Ariana, Benarus and Manuba. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
After the show break is going to be your sports news. Here's what's coming up. We check out all the action at the second Triathlon African Cup in Dakar.
How would you create